Welcome, everyone, to Los Libertinos podcast. I am your host, Carlos Abelard, and this is Chingazos and Fire episode number 53. Our guest today is Paul Fahrenheit. He is a Substack content provider that I came across via my dive into the dissident right. He keeps his personal identity secret because it's too dangerous for him to show his face at the risk of getting doxxed for simply being an intellectual and a proud gringo. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you for having me, Carlos. I greatly appreciate it. Buenos dias.
Oh, there you go, man. For sure, buenos dias. Yeah, it is. It's morning here in San Antonio. It is morning in wherever you're at. You know, where are you staying at right now, if you
I
don't
am
mind?
I live in the wonderful state of Virginia. And I make no secret of that because most of my content is based around the state of Virginia.
Okay, fair enough, man. On the show here, I like to say that half of the audience is political, libertarian, probably leans right, and some lefties for sure. And
Mhm.
then the rest is like my family and friends that tend to support and get into some of these podcasts, and then they'll ask me when we're hanging out and partying about some interviews. So most people will not know who you are. So if you don't mind, can you give a background into as much as you can of your born and raised, some of your family stuff, and then kind of how you got into this space, some, and then we'll get to it.
Okay, I can do something like that. I'll try to ensure that it's not like a biography or novel length thing, but I was born and raised in the state of Virginia, which for those of you who don't know was one of the states in the United States that fought for the Confederacy. It was actually where the capital of the Confederacy was in Richmond, and where most of the battles during the Civil War happened. My family has been in Virginia on both my mom's side and my dad's side for about 300 years. So since before independence of the United States, I have been here. This is my country, and I've never been anywhere else. Um, I went to college and I studied history, law, and politics in college. I also studied a little bit of philosophy. I specialized in history actually in Latin America, specifically in caudillos and caudillismo. Yo hablo poquito español. I don't speak quite a lot of it, but I speak somewhat enough of it to understand what most people are saying. Um, and and after that, I mean, all during all this time, I was generally had a similar path as you did. I was consuming content. Some of it was slightly political. Got into it in GamerGate back in those old days, which kind of led me down the rabbit hole of sort of questioning regime narratives, questioning political organizations of things, and why things were the way they were, and and why everything seems so boring and dull. Um, I enlisted in the United States military, I think 2 years ago. I've said that elsewhere. I'm in the army, and I'm still in the army, and I'm currently getting removed from it if they can make up their mind over the vaccine mandate because I refuse to take the vaccine, and so they are going to obviously remove me if they ever decide to get around to doing it. But when I was in the army, I saw the fall of Kabul in 2021 because I was in the right place at the right time with the right security clearance. And so I got to see the entire command and control, all of the organization, all this other stuff, from an intelligence shop, which was we were getting maps, Pentagon intelligence reports, all this other information. And I wasn't in Kabul; I was in Fort Bragg doing rear support, but still, I basically got as close as you could get to Kabul without being there, with having access to all that information. And I did not have a positive impression of the United States military's warfighting capabilities after that. And that came at the exact same time as the vaccine mandate. So that a lot of that kind of pushed me to start making content. And I've been writing Substack articles since, it's been about a year now, since fall winter of 21. And it started off slow at first, but I caught the eye of an individual by the name of Thomas 777. who my good friend Pete Quinones has interviewed quite extensively on his show. And and basically we got to talking, and I've appeared on Thomas's podcast, which is called Mind Phaser. You can find it on his Substack. Several times we've talked about revisionist history, and he's taught me a whole bunch of things. And from there, I gave a speech at an event that was held in Nashville, and that speech was about Francis Parker Yockey and Oswald Spengler and cyclical theories of history and stuff like that. And since then, I mean, it's taken off. I've been continuously writing Substack articles. I've changed some of my views somewhat. I advocate for a generally pro-American view, a pro-American sphere view that you won't find in a lot of places. But I also try to keep nuances. So forgive me if that was too long, but that's generally me.
Yeah, no, man, that's cool. Yeah, that's perfect. So the first time I came across you was on the Pete Quinones show, where you guys were doing an interview on Yaki, and you had just mentioned
Yes.
him. And I was very impressed with your style. You don't, someone like me that has to catch my thoughts as I'm talking or interacting with people. It just seemed like they just kind of flowed out of you. So I was very impressed. So I did a little bit of research on Yaki, looked up some of your stuff, and and then on YouTube, I looked up some of Yaki's stuff in a chapter on from his book called Imperium. It was somebody was reading it out, and it was the articulation of a culture chapter, and then I had jammed that, and I thought it was cool. I thought it was interesting. I thought it was clean, and whatever was going on, I didn't understand it all, but I knew that there was something to understand
Hmm.
about it. And then recently you did another show with Pete where you guys actually talked about that chapter, and then that's when I finally decided. I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna reach out and see what's up with Paul here, see if he'll come on. So thank you for coming on, but
Of course.
so we'll start off with that, since that was how I kind of got into some of your content. And so I guess the question right off the bat, or a little, well, maybe for the audience, if you don't mind, maybe just give a I know that the author guy, Yaki, that he's an interesting character. So maybe just give a
Hmm.
background on him,
Yes.
and then maybe how he's still influential now, and how some of his writings are a little controversial still, but also then talk about that chapter in particular, since
Mhm.
it's the one that I believe you say is your favorite from the book.
Yeah. And as a matter of fact, I think that that video you listened to was the exact same one I listened to that made it my favorite.
He
With
has like an
and
accent, right? The guy has an
yeah,
accent.
it's an affected the name of the gentleman who does the video is Augustus Invictus. That is his legal name. That is his real name.
That sounds dope.
But yeah, his you can actually notice in my own speaking style how that sort of affectation went on to influence my own speaking style, my own way of talking. And yes, that is probably one of my favorite, if not my favorite reading of Imperium. But yes, Francis Parker Yockey, he's a very, to say he's an interesting figure is kind of an understatement. He was born in Chicago in 1917. His parents were Irish Swiss, so he came from a generally Catholic background within Chicago. He was not practicing, but he was generally raised in that sort of upbringing. Um, and he went to several different colleges, and in those days, that's something that more than a couple of people did, just because of costs and all of that. He eventually got his bachelor's from Arizona State University. He later went and got his law degree cum laude from Notre Dame, and he practiced insurance law around the greater Chicago area for the late 1920s through the 1930s before he really got involved in politics. But he was getting involved in politics at that time. To give the audience an idea of what American politics looked like in the 1930s, it's not really how the history books portray it. Yeah, the Great Depression was going on, and yeah, there were New Dealers, but there was a lot of resistance to the New Deal. There was a lot of political factions. Charles Lindbergh in America First. You had Gerald L.K. Smith and the whole Evangelical Union. Father Charles Colin, who was a Catholic priest, who had a radio show decrying Roosevelt and all this other stuff. Huey Long in Louisiana. So you had all sorts of resistance going on to FDR and the New Dealers. And so who Francis Parker Yockey was, he was kind of up and comer within that sort of side of things, which you could generally call America first, isolationist, anti-war, all this other stuff. They didn't want to get involved in this war that everyone and their mother knew was going on in Europe. And so Yockey writes all of these articles. His first article was actually published in Father Charles Colin, who had the most popular radio show in the United States at the time, in his periodical, in his newsletter. But after the war, Yockey went and enlisted during the war, but after the war, because Yockey was a very, very successful lawyer, the victorious United States government basically drafted him to write case reports for the Nuremberg trials, for the second round of the Nuremberg trials. This was after all the big shots had already been tried. These were what they called the second string Nazis. And so Yockey, upon being a lawyer, being very well trained in the practice of law, saw what the Nuremberg trials were, and he kind of figured, this is kind of a kangaroo court. This isn't really law. You guys are kind of making up law as you go, and you're convicting them for these ex post facto, which means after the fact, like after you invented the law, you're convicting them of the crime they committed before it was illegal laws. And he said to the authorities, I'm not gonna participate in this. And they said to him, well, you're gonna participate in this or you're fired. And he says, well, fire me. And so they fired him. And so Yockey, after that, he goes around Europe. He gets involved with a lot of the former personnel of the mid-century regime in Germany, particularly General Otto Riemer, the fighter ace and war hero Hans Ulrich Rudel, von Leers, who was an Orientalist who lived down in Egypt. All of these other figures he got involved with. And then in 1948, he takes a trip to a place called British Bay, Ireland. And off the top of his head, working without notes, mind you, he writes this 500 or so page book, Imperium. And he releases it to an English audience. He presented it to Sir Oswald Mosley, who was he used to be the head of the British Union of Fascists after the war. He was still a far-right political figure. And he presented it to Mosley, and he said to Mosley, I will publish this under your name. And Mosley turned him down and didn't even read the book. But after he publishes Imperium, Yockey turns himself basically into a homemade spy. He's not spying for any nation, but he is doing work for pretty much every nation. He worked for Gamal Abdul al-Nasser in Egypt. After that, he went behind the Iron Curtain for all intent, because he stops writing at this period. We don't know what he did behind the Iron Curtain, but we know he was present at the Slansky trial, which was when the Czechoslovak government tried a whole bunch of Communist Party members for treason, a lot of them being Jewish.
Hold on. You said homemade spy.
A homemade spy.
We know. Homemade tortillas. We know homemade spy. How does somebody become a homemade spy? I mean, that sounds. I'm not gonna lie, man. Sounds a little fetty, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it kind of is, because you have to keep in mind at this time period. This was in the immediate years after the Second World War. This is when all of these intelligence agencies are starting to come into being.
Oh, okay.
The OSS is coming into being. The CIA hasn't been invented yet. The FBI is still concerned with like crime in the domestic side. And so it's kind of the Wild West.
There's not enough connections. There's not enough connections for them to realize there's a quadruple agent running amongst them or whatever, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. All right, man. Yeah, fair enough. Cool.
Yeah, and like every American intelligence agent, during the war, the Germans thought they were working for them, or the Russians thought they were working for them, and it really kind of was it was an insane time. A really good, another cool individual to look into is Otto Skorzeny, who was basically the Nazi James Bond, is what he was. He had a huge scar on his face. and he did all these insane sort of feats of intelligence and subterfuge. But Yaki was doing similar things. He was making observations, trailing certain individuals, writing propaganda, all of this other stuff for whatever regime he thought would advocate his political goals that he wrote in the book Imperium. And so he goes behind the Iron Curtain, and he's present at the Slansky trial, which is extremely important. The Slansky trial is where Yaki believed that the Soviet Union was less of a threat to Western and European culture than the United States was, based off of what happened at that trial. And he does work for the Czechoslovak and the East German government and probably even the Soviet government, but we don't know. But in 1960, Yaki was flying back to the United States, and he flew into Los Angeles, and his suitcase was sent to the wrong place. So, Yaki had already gotten up to San Francisco and Oakland at that time by the time they figured out whose suitcase it was. And so they open it to determine who to give it back to. And they find like 5 or 6 passports in it, all of this other falsified documents. And they come and they arrest Yaki. They arrest Yaki, and they set his bail at, I think, $15,000, which at the time was a lot of money. That was, I think, 5 or 6 times the amount of bail you typically set for falsified documents. And I don't know if the FBI knew who they had, but I think Yaki certainly did. And so for 11 days, there's basically this show trial that goes on with all of these reporters brought in, and all of this mud is getting slung. And at this time, a gentleman by the name of Willis Carto. Willis Carto is another figure in the post-war American right. I'm not going to get too much into him, but the important thing about it is that he would publish the second edition of Imperium that would ensure Imperium was widespread amongst American audiences. And so Willis Carto talks to Yaki, and kind of realizes that Yaki was an extremely important individual and his work needed to be preserved. And 11 days after being taken prisoner, arrested, Yaki kills himself in his cell. He kept a cyanide pill in his shoe, in the heel of his shoe. And so he killed himself in his cell to avoid, in those days, if you were a political prisoner, the United States government would basically just lobotomize you. Like, I wish I had a witty joke to make for that, but yeah, and he killed himself. And Willis Carto would go on to publish the second edition of Imperium, and ever since then, people have talked about and discussed Yaki's ideas and his life. Not on the mainstream, but for sure in intellectual circles, he's not really someone who can be ignored. A quick fact about Yaki: his IQ was tested at somewhere around 170. 170. That's 2 standard deviations above genius. So he was very much a smart guy. He was a concert level piano player in his youth, and he would have probably done that if he didn't get into a car accident that kept him from playing piano well. And so this was generally like a complete dude. This wasn't like some strange individual who hid in dark closets. He was a worldly man. He spoke several languages. He was able to make his way across the world, and he wrote this amazing book called Imperium. So I know that was a bit long, but
No, that's cool, man.
That's kind of Yaki.
Yeah. So when I was hearing you say that he wrote the book with no notes and just man, that's crazy. But if you're saying that he's that smart, that means that he was able to visually and through his experiences capture life and retain it and put it down on paper the way however way he saw it. Can you kind of talk about that one chapter, the articulation of culture, because that's kind of how I that's kind of how I take in a lot of information. When I interviewed Pete, I told him, that I kind of feel he's like a DJ. Like he'll throw out the records, and some I like, some I don't, and I'm not I'm not very good with words. I don't read a lot and stuff like that, but I could just feel and hear words, I guess is the best way. But that chapter just man, it just jammed man, it just jammed like metal to me, you know, like just like some good metal stuff, man. But you know, I don't know. Talk about how what's up with that chapter, man. Because I have my own thoughts about it. They're gonna be different from yours, but that's probably why some chapters like that are unique and interesting because everybody you know puts their own take on it, but there's still a foundational in there. But yeah, man, freestyle for sure on that chapter and why it's your one of your favorites.
Yeah, so the chapter of the articulation of a culture, it comes in a part of the book called cultural vitalism. The book is divided into a bunch of different parts, but this is basically Yaki in like successive tiers outlining each sort of part of his worldview, and he's using each part to build onto the next part. And so the articulation of a culture, the reason I like that one so much is because it outlines what makes the West, what we call Western European civilization, it it outlines what makes that different from every other culture in history.
What is the West to what is the West to him? Is it like Catholicism West or what is or you're or
So
for, like what is West to him and to you? Like what do you mean by that?
when we call Western civilization, what we mean by that generally is, at least when we're talking about Yaki, we mean that in the way that Oswald Spengler, who was Yaki's primary intellectual predecessor, outlined it. And what that is Northwest Europe. That is everything from Gibraltar all the way over to Sicily, at the southern end of it, going all the way up to the tip of Scandinavia. So that's Spain, Portugal, France, Italy, Switzerland, Germany, the Netherlands, England, Norway, Denmark, all of that. Everything that's a Western country that speaks a semi-Romance language. It does not include places like Poland, places like um, places like maybe to an extent Hungary, because that's a different people. Those are Slavs. They have an entirely different culture, history, and reason for being. But that's what Yaki's talking about when he talks about the West. It also includes places like America. The United States was founded by Westerners, so it's basically a second Europe, and I think to a certain extent most of Latin America as well. Although that's arguable, but I think that Latin America has a place there too, being founded by the Spaniards, and so that's what he's talking about. It does largely include Catholicism and the Catholic faith. It also includes Protestantism and the Protestant faith, because those are both products of Europe. Those both came from European culture and European civilization. If that makes sense to you.
Yeah, no, I got it, man. Yeah, we're on the same page.
Excellent. Um, and so in this chapter, the articulation of a culture, Yaki is outlining what makes the West different. He's talking about stuff like how the West understands religion, how we understand art, how we understand rifles, statues, factories, different from everyone else. And he's talking about the different kinds of people, the different kinds of human beings. It's you ever read have you ever read Don Quixote? Are you familiar at all with Don
No,
Quixote?
no, but one of my first interview, his name is AJ Van Slyke. He told me that that's the foundation for a lot. That book is a foundation for a lot of type of I don't know, I guess like Spanish writing or
Yeah.
you know. So no, I've never read it, but he told me that basically when we listen to all of my norteño
Mm.
corridos and all these songs, he goes, "Oh, that's all Don Quixote there. That's all you know." So that's as much as I know, man. I don't know if that
So
sounds right.
I just wanted to use it as an example, because what Yaki outlines is the two different kinds of people that are within the Western culture. And I like to use Don Quixote because the two primary characters in that book are, Don Quixote de la Mancha, who is uno caballero de la Mancha en España. He is a gentleman. He is a knight. He is a man who lives by higher ideals, who lives by chivalry and all this other stuff. And then there's Sancho Panza, Sancho Panza is a peasant. He is a low class man, a commoner who's kind of, he follows wherever Don Quixote goes, but he's always reluctant about it. And so, another way I do it is, it's like the difference between someone like, let's say, a hugely smart and intelligent engineer who's also a politician, who does all these things. He's like a high speed guy. He's top tier. Everyone knows who he is. He's extremely cultured. He's wealthy and all that other stuff. And compare that to your average dude on Buffalo Wild Wings on Friday night. Like, those are the two kinds of people Yaki is outlining. And the first kind, the capable guys, the guys who think, the guys who do things, the guys, and it's not even so much like you have to be a genius, you have to be 5,000 IQ, or you have to know how to do everything, or all this other stuff. It's more of the people who look at life and think there's more to it just than eating food and, listening to music and chilling with your bros, even though all of those things are great. And there's more to it than that. There's a higher purpose. And that's what Yaki is outlining the kind of people is. And he calls them the culture bearing stratum. You could think of them not so much in that heavy technical of a word, but you could think of them just as caballeros, gentlemen, people who think about higher ideals, who think about, well, why are we doing all of this stuff? We've got this society, we've got all this stuff organized, but what are we doing it for? Why do we have it?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, no, I hear when you say caballeros, that'll connect with a lot of my audience, especially, or also like when people get older, right? Like as they get older, if the community or the family structure respects you enough as, I guess, one of these, they'll put a Don next to your name, right? Like Don Carlos or Don whatever, and the people kind of, okay, he's, so yeah, yeah. I mean, okay,
yeah,
cool, cool, cool.
yeah, that's my real quick. That's my lifelong goal. My retirement dream is to buy an hacienda in somewhere like Colombia or Venezuela, and the people calling me Don Paulo or something like that while
Nice.
I live in that's just my retirement dream.
Yeah, man, that sounds
But
good. Hey, what's up, everyone? Just wanted to tell you about our sponsor. It is Paloma Verde CBD from palomaverdecbd.com. It's a small business that my wife and I own. And we want to tell you about some new products that we have. Well, especially one. Uh, Check it out. These little homies right here, 5 milligrams of Delta 9 in each one. Um, the story behind some of these was that when we were first trying them out from our supplier, I took two of them, and I remember telling my wife, I like to drink, right? If you're watching this episode, you see I have a little glass of tequila with me there, and we're gonna watch our late night movies, is where we usually do our hangouts, and I was like, you know what? I don't want to drink. I'm kind of feeling these gummies coming up a little bit, and yeah, no, these things get you high. Okay, so get yourself some of these for sure. And then that's funny. And then when we had them, we were just going at a party, right? My wife's party about a month ago. Everybody that wanted some got some. And usually these parties are, as a host of a party, we always like to party. You always got to make sure who has drinks. Everybody's having fun. You're hosting. And on this one, it was different, where some friends came in later on, and they're like, why is the party all kind of mellow? And we told them, we gave everybody samples of our new Delta 9 5 milligram gummies, and everybody was mellow, man. It was a trip. I remember just everybody was playing pool, listening to the music kind of low. Everybody was getting, it was cool. So get these 5 milligram THC gummies at palomaverdecbd.com. Use the promo code Chingazos, CHINGASOS, for 20% off of your order, and support the show and small business. Thank you.
but yeah, man. And so that's the stuff that Yaki is talking about. He's talking about the sort of the gentleman, the patriarch of the family, the patriarch of the civilization. and all of the stuff that goes into it. And he gives a bunch of examples of what kind of people he's talking about. He talks about Beethoven, Shakespeare, Rembrandt, who are some of the greatest artistic minds. Um, and he compares that to, your average dude in a Buffalo Wild Wings on Friday night who's only sitting there drinking beer, eating wings, watching the game, doesn't really care about nothing other than his basic stuff. Commoners, peasants, if you will. I mean, these are older words, but they kind of describe the same thing. It's people who don't think, if that makes sense. And there's a lot of those. There's a lot of people who don't think that the past couple of years, I think, has showed us.
Do you attach a lot of sports consumption as one of those people?
Yeah, it's a really good indicator. I mean, now I'm not saying if you like someone like if you like to watch the River Plate versus Boca Juniors game, I'm not saying that you're one of these people. Because I like soccer. I watch soccer every now and again, but it's like when your whole life or one of the biggest part of your lives is sports consumption, and these super fans, these tribal people, like, yeah, that's the kind of thing to look for. Another thing to look for
That's interesting, man.
is,
That's interesting. Yeah, but yeah, I know what you're saying, man. Yeah, I know
yeah,
a lot of people. Well, I'm not. Well, a little pushback, but like but it's common in that the sports reference to describe people like that is common, but that's not to say that those people could be like high net worth or they're good at their jobs and all that, and then they just consume a lot of content of sports, but it doesn't mean that they're bad or whatever. It's just that they just like that, right? I mean, you're not saying
yeah,
complete. You're not saying that you couldn't interact with them. You might get a little bored of the depending on the conversation, but they're still homies. They can be homies, right?
exactly, yeah. And well, and here's I don't want to say anything that like has anyone thinking about any people negatively or anything like that. This is just kind of how it's like the differences between a super smart guy who knows how to build a bridge and a dude who knows how to make a papusa or something like that. Like you don't expect the dude who's sitting there in the kitchen cooking it up to know how to build like this massive bridge across this river, if that makes sense. It's differences of capabilities. And and so, yeah, and like I said with the sports thing, not everyone who likes sports is like this. Like I said, I like sports. I like watching football. I like watching SEC football with Ole Miss and getting drunk with my friends. But
Yeah, well,
uh,
you know what? It was cool, man. You know, my wife knows that that's one of my goals is to. So I want to become wealthy enough to take my family to all of the biggest sporting events.
yeah,
And yeah, for sure, Super Clasico in Argentina. That's one of them on the list. And and just so you know, you because you might not know, I do incorporate my sports. With my life. I do say like football is life, and my bit, and I've been saying it like for like 10 plus years, man. Like for a long time, when I would come on local radio here in San Antonio, is that
hmm,
I would say that my whole agenda is that I want Texas to win a World Cup before the United States does. So I bring in my
Texas
secessionist
national team.
I bring in my secessionist ideas with my sports ideas and try
Hmm.
to bring them together so I can get the common folk to get interested in the ideas that I'm trying to mesh them together.
Yeah.
But that's just
Well,
that's
do you
my
ever
bit.
you ever
That's my
play
bit.
football? You ever play soccer rather?
Yeah, my whole life.
What position?
Well, when I was when I was a kid, forward, and then as you get older, you kind of start going all the way to the back, man. But
I was a goalie from beginning to end.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's perfect, man. Yeah, yeah. So when in the beer leagues, when I had my own team, you end up playing goalie and you're the manager and all that. So actually, you had talked about your hacienda. It is cool that we're freestyle talking, man. It's good, man. It's good to talk like this. My goal, and my wife knew this when we were first dating, was that I wanted to become even wealthy enough to be able to own like a club team somewhere, and I don't know, man. I don't know why that's my shit, but recently with that new show, Welcome to Wrexham, where these Hollywood guys bought a like a fourth division team in the FA pyramid. I told my wife, I was like, that's what I've been trying to tell you. Like, you can buy these teams on the cheap, and you flip them like we flip houses. You can make money. And so anyway, she gave me a number, right? She said, okay, 10 million. Put 10 million in the bank somehow, and you can go buy your team. So I got my number, man. So
You got your
I'm working on it.
you got your number. Well, I mean, you could either do that, or you could make friends with one of these oil sheiks out in freaking the UAE and have them come in and dump $5 billion into some third league team and just
That's right, dude. That's
just buy
right.
Messi and Neymar and have them playing at like FC Cambridge or something like that.
Yeah, I always talk about. I always tag Elon Musk, and I always tell him, "Hey, I was like, hey, man, you want to be the president? Why don't you be the president of the Texas Football Federation and just you have enough money to make your own?" I was like, we can start because there's a lot of we're in I guess in the UK, like Wales and Ireland, like even though they're part of the UK, I guess they have their own football federations. So my agenda now is that don't go so hard on the Texas secession first. I would say that Texas has enough of a culture and a history that it should apply for a to have its own federation. But anyway, I'm going into my shit, man. Sorry, man. We kind of went on another thing, but yeah, okay. But the sports thing, but yeah, I get it, man. So he's talking about the two guys, and I know that you're also breaking it down like that. But there's a lot of in betweens and
Well,
connections
yeah, there's exceptions that prove the rule, and yeah, like sports is an expression of culture in certain ways. It's entertainment is one of the places you can go to find how a civilization entertains itself. You can learn a lot about it by the kind of sports they play. And I don't want to, and I like I said, I don't want to make anyone feel shitty for liking soccer or nothing like that. But I use it as an example because there are these people who get so caught up in it that they don't really think about it at the end of the day. These are the kind of people that will go to a Pittsburgh Steelers and Baltimore Ravens game just to get into a fight or just to scream along with the crowd or just to get drunk off their ass and make a humiliation of themselves in public. And and that's another thing is like party politics, obsessing over mainstream politics, like the Fox News watchers, the freaking MSNBC watchers, all of them. And I'm not saying, once again, if you watch those things, this isn't this is not, hashtag not all and all that. But but these are indicators. These are people who get caught up in it, who make it their entire life, who don't have anything going on outside of it. And that's the kind of people Yaki's talking about, the sort of the lesser men, those who can't like think things out, who can't not even so much think things out, but more so like feel things out,
No, I know what you're saying, man. I know what you're saying. I interact with a lot of people, and I can get reads pretty fast, but I like to then play with myself to see if I can get them interested in what I'm interested in
Mhm.
without making them feel like they've never heard what I'm saying. It's kind of
Yeah.
a cool little thing that I try to do. And I know I do a little bit that here on the podcast. I'll try to make it, I'm trying to make these connections a little bit so people don't get to, like take a step back. I want people to have, to be on the front foot on ideas that they've never heard
Yeah.
about.
Well, yeah, like having a good time and all that, pushing the conversation in a way that you think benefits both parties. Yeah, that's perfectly. I do the same thing. And I know I can sometimes get caught up in this like sort of heavy intellectualism, and I, I can start going on and on and on. Like man, you get me talking about something. I could talk about something till all day. I could talk about something for 14, 15 hours. It's probably because I love the sound of my own voice so much. But but no, yeah, and but basically to kind of cap this is all in the first part of the chapter, the articulation of culture. And to kind of cap this off is it's like the kind of people who obsess, who lose themselves in sports and politics, in food, in in drugs and all this other stuff. These aren't the kind of people that you can keep a culture, a civilization going with. You can't, like, the lights go off without them, and everything stops. And the other kind of person, the people that, the gentlemen, the higher thinkers, the people that keep the civilization going, those who feel, even if they don't think it, feel, understand it. That's what's important, and that's the first part of the chapter, the articulation of culture. And the second part, he he goes into how things develop, how what all of politics, all of war, economics, all of this is really just a fight between. And it's a fight between these two concepts he calls tradition and innovation. Tradition and innovation. What we were doing yesterday, what we should be doing tomorrow. And at the end of the day, pretty much all political issues, everything we get into a fight over just boils down to, is what we were doing yesterday better versus is what we need to be doing tomorrow better, you know? And in all honesty, I mean, a lot of people, especially where I come from, dissident writers, they get too caught up in the tradition side of things. They get too focused on we need to keep everything the exact same. It can't change at all. And that's not a flexible way of thinking. You know, traditions are important. You do need to keep some of them around. You do need to keep a culture going on, but at some point, you know, you need to let innovation come in, because otherwise you stagnate, you stop. You know, it's like, for example, you know, we're hitting the soccer metaphor. I'm going to give you a soccer metaphor, right? My favorite number 10 of all time was Francesco Totti, who played for AS Roma. He was my favorite player ever. I think he was a better 10 than Messi, but that's a that's a controversial take. But when Totti was getting older, he needed to change up his playing style. He couldn't do all of this outright feats of athleticism he was doing earlier. He couldn't do on these long sprints. These he couldn't keep up with the young guys anymore, just because he didn't have that energy. And so he adapted his playing style to a far more technical, skillful, number 10, sort of being the air traffic controller for the ball up the field. And he was able to adapt and play well into his 30s and 40s. I think he retired in,
Recently, like
yeah,
not too
yeah,
long ago. Yeah.
in the 20 teens, yeah. So and I think, you know, Diego Maradona did something similar. All of these other great players, you know, you always see, as they get older, they have to kind of adapt. They have to kind of change themselves. And that's what I'm talking about with, you know, you talk about tradition versus innovation, right? Like it or not, you're gonna get older. Like it or not, your civilization, what you're doing now isn't going to be working tomorrow, because the situation will be changed. You know, you won't be dealing with the same problems. So you've got to have a bit of adaptability, is the word you use. You got to
You,
be thinking on your feet. You
you,
know,
you
you
know,
got to go ahead.
I was just gonna interrupt a little bit just to tell you kind of like on the work again on the football stuff. And so I had Daniel McCarthy on. He's a guy that oh man, he's the editor for some magazine,
Hmm.
it's an old conservative magazine. Man, I forgot which one. But I had told him that
National Review.
not National Review. It's I don't man, I don't want to say the wrong name, but it's one of these old ones that one of these guys founded that a lot of people on the right like man shit, I should know that. My bad, Daniel, because he's supposed to come back on again. But I had told him how I kind of view the political world through football terms, and what I say is that the players that play on the field, to me, they're like the left. You know, they're meant to be a little bit more free with their space and all that, and that the rules, the refs and the organization that puts the game together and all that, that's more like the right, like the conservatives and all that, or not. They're not meant to get into the game. They're meant to just set the lines and the rules of it and let the left play around, and then we can observe and see what styles are better, what styles are not. And I
Hmm.
kind of say that the what happened was that the refs wanted to kind of get into the game when that's not their role to get into it and make themselves part of the game. and that's where a lot of the tensions come. And then I kind of put that the stadium, of course, is us watching it, and then that the hooligans are the extremes on each side, and I kind of watch it like that, like in that form. So I just brought that up so you know that
Oh yeah.
that's part of my. I kind of see things like in that way. It doesn't have to be that, but that's just my general take on that. The people on the field that are playing, they have a different spirit in them than the ones that are blowing the whistle.
Oh yeah.
Uh, um,
Well, and Carlos, my man, I mean, this is a side of me that doesn't often come out. I've done a lot of interviews, I've done a lot of content and all that, and it's mostly political, historical stuff. But I really do love soccer slash football slash it's an American audience. It's difficult, and I never get a chance to talk about it, almost never.
oh shit,
But
man! I'm gonna have you talking sports all through this conversation.
well, but the thing is though, it's not necessarily just that, because I actually think soccer is one of the best illustrations, because it is sort of the worldwide game, with the highest highs and the lowest lows. Um, I don't know who the Ronaldo is the highest paid athlete in the world. I think still, and Cristiano Ronaldo, obviously not the other one. Um, but also you've got people in, like, backwater Ecuador, a bunch of kids, they're still kicking around the soccer ball the same way, the highest highs and the lowest lows. And I actually think soccer is something that you can look at really as a political metaphor. You can understand a lot of politics if you do apply that framework of soccer. And I'm probably pissing off your audience by keep calling it soccer, but
That's cool, man.
but um but that's the thing with it is, and I mean, the game now is not going to be the same in 20 years as it was 20 years ago. 20 years ago, you still had Thierry Henry. So my favorite club of all time is Arsenal. Arsenal is my favorite club. And that's because when I was, I think, a couple of years old, uh, I watched Thierry Henry and Patrick Vieira and that whole Invincibles team from 2003, 2004, uh, under Arsene Wenger. I watched them go a whole season without taking a single defeat. That's something. And even if they have kind of been shit since then, that's still something that made me love them. And you know that's what it was 20 years ago. That's what the game was 20 years ago. Arsene Wenger was actually one of the coaches on the cutting edge of changing what football, what soccer was going to be in the next 20 years. And pretty much everyone, you know, kind of kind of adopted a lot of the innovative techniques he was doing, him and Sir Alex Ferguson and all those other great coaches of that time. And that's kind of that we're still kind of living through that. And then recently, players like Kylian Mbappe came along, these super really pacey forwards who can kind of carry and all that. But eventually, you'll find another player who can just kind of completely disrupt that system. And those pacey forwards won't be the way anymore. And so you got to completely re-evaluate how your team does it. Tiki Taka used to be Tiki Taka when it first came out, when Van Cruyff developed it. Um, no one could stop it. No one could stop it because it was just so well executed. It was so well executed. But eventually, as it was around long enough, people found ways to counteract it. I think that was after Spain won the World Cup using a tiki taka system in I think it was 2010. Yeah. But Carlos, if you understand where I'm going with this,
Yeah, man.
this is
This
the
is my shit,
argument.
man. I understand everything you're saying,
Yeah.
and I'm yeah, I get it, man. Yeah.
This is the argument between tradition and innovation, right? If you're using a tiki taka system and against like a pacey forward like Mbappe, you could do all right, but it's not going to be like the cutting edge game defining system that it was when Van Cruyff developed it. So that's the whole point Yaki's trying to make with tradition versus innovation.
Yeah, no, I hear you, man. I guess I'm looking forward to what's coming up, man. I think some of these players are going to be interesting, and as long as the rules stay as that's like, again, it goes, as long as the rules stay as traditional as they can be. I felt uneasy when a lot of these like the VAR
Yeah, fuck
because
that stuff.
but I felt it at the beginning because I want the referee to be excellent and
Mhm.
have the pressure of the whole stadium, right? Because again, again, I bring it to like they're the ones that gotta conserve the game, and but the pressure's on them, So don't focus on anything focus on the line. So I like the pressure on the refs to be perfect, but they're human and they make mistakes. So I guess they changed it to that. So over time, I've kind of gotten okay with it, So that might be a little like thing that I wonder if like over time, as people get mad about stuff and then they kind of see that it works okay, they kind of get over it a little bit on a lot of fronts. But I don't know. I guess that's another little topic on that. But yeah, so tradition and innovation, it's just what worked in the past and what works in the new. So that was on the second part of that chapter.
Yeah, that's the second part. And, to be completely honest, there may come a time when something that we did a long time ago is actually that we stopped doing at some point. It's actually the best thing to bring back because that's the best. Like, you know, going back to our soccer metaphor, there may come a time in the future of soccer that actually a tiki taka system works best as a counter to whatever new thing uh, people have come up with in soccer. So that that might be the case, right? So you can never dismiss all tradition completely, and that's why we have history. That's why we have people writing down history books, because oftentimes, history is the constant forgetting and attempting to remember things we've already forgotten. And and as long as we've got that record we can go back to and kind of look at and put something together, we can bring back these traditions to fit a new era that requires those to be brought back. you know and and that's the whole thing with it. Like, this is not, none of these are hard and fast rules. None of these are like strict, every single time you need to be doing this, because that's not adaptable. That's being a zealot. That's sticking to something without thinking about it. You know what I mean? And that's what he's talking about in the second part of the chapter.
Yeah, and then moving on to the rest of it.
Oh no, that's the rest. That's the whole
That
chapter.
was
That's
it.
all.
What I took out of it, I kind of took out that there was like in there, or maybe it's because that's just the way I like to think about a lot of stuff. I felt like I heard a lot of like trying to find a balance, maybe between, maybe like we're saying, between these two, or maybe between being like even though the way it's said in the way he's saying it, like oh, because he kind of even goes off on a run where he's like, oh, there's people that would, man, I don't know, man, he was talking some shit, like he was saying, I remember he was talking some shit, and I remember just thinking like, oh, come, I mean, yeah, but I was like, oh, come on, I mean, everybody, I don't know, man, I guess I'm more of a like of a balance. I hear balance in there, but I know that it's doesn't come off like that, but I hear that. So in that book, though, just to move on a little bit,
Mhm.
what are the controversial parts of the book or about Yaki that? So I had mentioned to some people that I was going to interview you, and we were going to talk about this a little bit, and they had normal like step back, like, oh, that's the guy that all the neo-Nazis in jail read or some shit like that. And I was like, yeah, I was like, yeah, that's the word on the street. I mean, I don't know. I mean, and then I did, when I looked up the word, I guess there was a movie in 2016. I didn't watch it, but there's like a movie, So yeah, it has that behind
Yeah.
it. So what are the controversial things? Are they justified, or is it just or is it all, I don't know, man. Like, is it all anti just white kind of stuff, that narratives that they put on the
If
guy,
you
or
no, if you want to read like trashy sort of neo-Nazi stuff, that doesn't really have any intellectual complexity behind it, is just basically, oh, I don't like am I allowed to say, I'm not going to say slurs, but oh, I don't like them, insert slur here. And that's George Lincoln Rockwell. Like, that's all that is. That's all just railing against this group or that group. Yaki is different.
okay,
Yaki is different because he requires you to pay attention to him when he's writing. he uses a lot of heavy technical terms that he kind of invents. A lot of them come from the great German historian and philosopher Oswald Spengler, who was writing about 20 years before, or 20, 30 years before Yaki was, before the First World War. Um, and so like Yaki's work is very much within a continuity of historical studies, right? So it's not like this hate pamphlet. You can read it that way if you really want to, but it's like using the Mona Lisa as a placemat. You know, there are there are there are like there are some things in it you could read that way, because that's what history is. History is a hateful thing. History is violent. History kills people. It is what it is, and the question is whether you choose to accept that and move on, or you choose to get stuck in that and moralize like some freaking leftist,
Mm.
and talk about how things should be instead of how things are. And so a lot of people, especially a lot of the people who trash talk Yaki, number one, they haven't read the book. Number two, they just think they just take the title. Like, for example, that movie, they take the title and they ascribe to it all of these invented stuff that like the skinheads in the 90s were doing and all this other stuff. But none of them were reading Yaki. None of them were doing that. They were, because they're not, quite frankly, I don't think they were generally intelligent enough to read Yaki.
Mm.
So that's why I have to say some stuff like is like, if especially in the modern day, if someone is labeling something that like, oh, this is what the Nazis would have done or something like that, that's, I think, a pretty good indicator for you to take a look at it, because you need to decide for yourself at this point, because as well as I do, Carlos, these people have gone crazy. These people have gone absolutely insane. And they're threatening to set the whole world on fire with them. And as they're going out, they're trying to decry as many things as possible with this label. And so that's kind of my general defense of Yaki, is he was a genius. He had all of these ideas and he put them all in this book, and you have to kind of understand all of them from their own end, and you can't label them with anything like that.
Hey, what's up, guys? Just wanted to let you know about a podcast that I've been jamming for about a year now. It's called the Morning After Podcast. It plays at 7:30 Central Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Justin and the crew, Matt, Dag, and Clyde are my gringo homies that man, they put a cool spin on the topics of the day. Um, they It's meant to be a light show with serious topics, but they put their gringo spin on it. And yeah, I mean, for sure, it's a little edgy. If that's not your vibe, uh, don't check them out. But if you like to have a laugh and maybe catch me on the chats there, for sure, tune in to the Morning After Podcast. I'll put a link at the bottom. Please go hit subscribe on them, check them out, and support our sponsor. And see you there. Peace. Yeah, no, that's cool. Before we move on past Yaki here, quick question, because I didn't understand this part, but I mean, I heard it where he's talking about like Egyptian high, he's got like Egyptian high culture, and then two, not high culture, but he kind of, my
Yeah.
thinking is that he's talking about like people that can build pyramids and like
Yes.
okay, but and then he'll say like that the Mexican ignored their techniques. But to me, like I know Mexicans is a mixture of Spanish and indigenous, but the
So
indigenous were still building pyramids. So that I kind of felt, oh, what is this guy Vato saying? So I don't know. You tell me, what was he saying in that little part there?
yeah, so that comes from Oswald Spengler, who I've mentioned a couple of
Okay.
times already. Oswald Spengler had this system of history, that all of history is a series of what you call high cultures. And there've been about eight, and they're all in different parts of the world. All that technics is perpetually more advancing series of technology, right? Uh, a problem with the West, and a problem with a lot of people in the West, is they think that a civilization is only marked by how technologically advanced it is. Some civilizations that have been extremely sophisticated, extremely advanced civilizations, have ignored technology completely and focused on other things. And that was the point Yaki was making.
Oh, okay, okay. It
So for
wasn't it
example,
wasn't a negative thing.
it wasn't a negative thing.
Oh,
No, it
my
was a
bad, man.
neutral thing. No, no,
Okay.
no, it's all good. Yeah, it's and you wouldn't have known that if you hadn't have read
I just
Spangler.
I just went to
Yeah,
Egyptians, I mean not Egyptians. I went to buildings. I went to
yeah.
like, I was like, wait, both do buildings. Why did one ignore one? But okay, yeah, okay, cool.
So when he says the Mexican high culture, he was, this was before we started using words like Mesoamerican and stuff like that. So back in the day, that's what he was referring to is the Aztecs and the Mayans. And the Aztecs and the Mayans largely did ignore technological innovations the way the West didn't, because the Aztecs and Mayans, basically, if you have something that works for you, why change it? Right? The Aztecs were able to keep the entire Central American Valley under control with obsidian clubs and like wooden armor. That's all they needed. They didn't need anything else. If they had needed something else, then they would have developed it. But they didn't need something else until the Spanish came, and by that point, it was too late. And so that's the point of it. Is it's like, but what the Aztecs and the Mayans did is they had these super advanced systems of astronomy, of calendars. They knew stuff about the stars that we're still trying to figure out. They knew stuff. So it's like it's not like a one thing or another. Every high culture, every civilization has done things that made sense to them and made sense to them in their time. And we can only understand them if we put ourselves in their shoes and think about, well, I'm a Mayan living in the 400s, or I'm an Aztec living in the 1300s. What is the best thing for me right now? And that's what Yaki's talking about, is he's comparing these different high cultures.
Okay. No, I mean, yeah, that's cool, man. I knew that it wasn't, I took it that way, but I also didn't take it like that way completely.
Mm-hmm.
But it's this is why it's good to ask, for to talk about it. When I had originally reached out to you, I had sent you a corrido song. Well, it's not really corrido, but it's a song from Los Tigres del Norte, and I kind of told you that oh, this is kind of something we jam, and I might have sent it with a little bit of the intention of having a little bit of our different where I wouldn't say where I come from, but yeah, like my side comes from like South, and I guess you would kind of claim more. When I say South, like norteño, but I'm talking about
Are
like
you Tejano or are you
yeah,
Norteño?
yeah. I would say that I like norteño music, but I'm
Mm.
from Texas, so I'm more Tejanos.
Okay, gotcha. So
But
keep in mind, Carla, I don't mean to interrupt you, but
no,
keep
go
in
ahead.
mind, like I specialized in Latin America, particularly Mexico.
Oh,
So
perfect,
this
cool.
is stuff I know about. Like so the Norteños are an interesting group of people. They're actually very similar to the Tejanos across the border in that they're all rancheros. They've got these massive herds of cattle and all of that, and that's a lot of where the cowboy culture came from, the wide brim hats and all that later Americans adopted as they moved west. Um, but that was kind of like I want to assure you, like, this is stuff I know
Oh,
about.
perfect, man. So we're gonna have a good conversation.
Yeah.
So yeah, on some of my bit too on my show here, I basically try to tell the right wing or because I lean right that
Mm.
hey, you have a whole class of people here, norteños, that basically listen to narco corrido songs, basically telling the feds to fuck off, and you're not trying to get them. You're actually telling these people to fuck off. So I was like, there's not a connection that anyway. I'm trying to connect a little bit of these ideas and
Mm.
say like, hey, there's a people here that isn't just all about they're not what you think they are. But anyway, so in that song, it's called Somos Más Americanos. And I don't know if you got to hear it or not, but it's basically like the song is basically just saying like that America, the landmass, was at first indigenous, and then it got mixed with Spanish, and they were that part was here originally or first, that mixture, and then like the Anglo-Saxons came in, and then there's like, hey, we shouldn't have any beef between us. We're just hardworking people, and just it's kind of like that. It's kind of that kind of the vibe, and I don't 100% agree with it that it's like that clear. But the song definitely does jam when it comes on. We all sing it, and we're like, somos más americanos and all that. So I guess just my question was, you had said in the beginning that you're pro American sphere,
Mhm.
and all that. So I guess I was just trying to ask you, what is your general take on immigration, whether it's here in the American sphere or the European sphere or any
Mm.
sphere, like your general idea, and then maybe and then you can focus, whether it's the southern border or northern border,
Mhm.
however you want to play with that. But yeah, go ahead and freestyle on your immigration.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so keep in mind, I think every people that exists, norteños, they come from the north. They come from Sonora, Chihuahua, not Sinaloa. It's a bit further south, but basically all of these states in the north, that's where they come from. That's y'all's home. That is where the norteño people were developed, and um, and in all honesty, I mean that's always been a sort of border region. That's always been a region where the border between the United States and Mexico has always been kind of weird, kind of porous, I guess is the right way to say, because you have, even before Pancho Villa rode up in the early 1900s and raided some Texas towns, like you would have American what we called filibusters. These were adventurers, mercenarios who would get in these bands. There's a really good book by Cormac McCarthy called Blood Meridian about this sort of stuff, and they'd go down and hunt Apaches or other Comanches, other Indians, um, and so keep in mind, this isn't unprecedented that you have gringos and mestizos largely living next to each other in the American border, and even sort of going back and forth. The problem that arises is that it's not the norteños in large numbers that are crossing the border from Mexico into the United States. It's largely Istmos. It's people from El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, who make this long trip up from these Central American countries where they're entirely different. And they make this long trip up and they come into the United States en masse. Um, Norteños and Texans and Tejanos have been able to kind of coexist for a very long time. They all kind of get each other in a certain way. But these Istmos coming from much further south, they're almost completely different. They come from jungles, not deserts. And they've got different ways of being, different ways of understanding things. And so the problem is that I guess we're running into is that anywhere where you have this massive influx of more and more and more people just rushing in, that's just going to cause violence straight up. Just as a matter of course. For example, think of it like this, man. Let's say you're in a room. Let's say you're and your boys are in a bar, right? And it's just you three at the bar. It's kind of quiet. You're talking, you're chilling, and all of a sudden 30 dudes roll up into that bar, just all of a sudden at once. I'm not saying a fight's going to break out, but it is going to get a little bit tense. It is going to get a little bit, a little bit loud, a little bit nervous, right? And that's the same principle applies to this, tens of thousands of people per month coming in. This
But
immigrant.
does that apply? Wouldn't it be more like, just because of the numbers, like a bar full of all of your homies, like 100 deep, and then one or two people come in to the bar, and
No, that's not the same.
it's not
That's
the
not at
same.
all the same. That's not this, because that's entirely flipping the script. If it's just you and your couple homies and you're having like a chill night, it's kind of intimate, sort of. There's nothing going on, and the vibe is different. You know what I mean? The atmosphere is different. But then all of a sudden, 30 drunk frat boys come in, and the vibe completely changes, right? And all of a sudden, you're outnumbered 10-1, and you're looking at your boys like, are these
I guess
boys
I'm
about
trying to push back on the picture
to?
that they're coming in numbers that outnumber natives 10-1 or something like that.
Well, it's not all at once, not all at once, but as the trend continues, I don't believe that whites becoming a minority in the United States can be stopped. I don't think that that's something that you can prevent, especially given the current circumstances. Um, but that's just a question of mathematics, my man. You don't need to have political beliefs one way or another to just
Yeah.
determine if X many people keep coming in at this rate over this period of time, they will outnumber. And I mean, it is what it is. It's an issue you got to deal with. I mean, it's just the thing is it's like the issues I run into is that these Istmos, these people from El Salvador,
I never heard
from
that term though. I never heard that term. That's cool. I mean, what is it called? What does it mean? Like Islos?
Istmos, from
Ismos.
it's a Latin phrase meaning the isthmus, meaning the meaning a small parcel of land that's like really close together with two seas on either end. The
Cool. Yeah,
all
that's
of
cool.
Central America south of Oaxaca and Yucatan is kind of like that. You know, they're all, you have to keep in mind they're different people than norteños. Norteños have a lot more European admixture than generally other mestizo populations, but these people from the isthmus, they're a lot more Mayan. They've got a lot more Indian admixture. um and that inclines them differently. Up where I live, there's a lot of El Salvadorians. Back before MS-13 got destroyed, MS-13 used to roll really deep up here. MS-13 is completely different from, let's say, the Sinaloas or the Belchon-Levias. They do things a completely different way. They're way more violent. Not to say that the Belchon-Levias and the Sinaloas aren't violent, but they're more controlled with it, if you know what I mean. Um, and so that's the thing it's not only the fact that large amounts of people are coming in, it's that these people from the isthmus, and I'm not saying all of them, I'm never saying all of them, I've got tons of friends who have met from El Salvador, from Honduras, from all these other places, you know. It's just the thing is that a lot of them are coming in and bringing violence with them, even if they themselves aren't violent. Maybe they're running away from MS-13, or they're running away from someone else, and those people are following them, if that makes sense to you. And I personally think that immigration's only happening because their own countries are shitholes. And the United States is to blame for that somewhat. I know the United Fruit Company and all this other stuff. You know, I'm not saying we're without blame there, but what I think the solution is, I think the solution is finding a way to improve all of these countries in Central America, finding a way to increase their standard of living so that people don't have to leave and come here. You know, the president, I forget his name, the president of El Salvador, um, proved you could do this. Proved you could do this in probably about 2 years. He came in, he went out, he went hard after MS-13. He used the police, he locked up all the criminals, and now El Salvador is actually a really nice place to live. Costa Rica has always been able to do this. Costa Rica is actually a very stable country, with almost no corruption and all that other stuff. You don't see really any Costa Ricans coming to the United States. It's all people from before El Salvador got fixed. It was people from El Salvador, people from Honduras, people from Guatemala, all these similar places that are poorly run. And so Mexico Mexico used to keep these people south of the Yucatan. That's what Mexico used to do. But Mexico has had its own problems. And, you know, I think that what the United States should be doing, instead of screwing around in Eastern Europe and in the Middle East and all this other stuff, in all these wars that don't really benefit us, I think the United States should be focusing all of its resources on stabilizing Mexico, ensuring Mexico is a stable country, with economic support and development and all this other stuff, and then stabilizing Central America. Because when our neighbors are stabilized, you know, we don't need to worry about all this immigration coming in and all that. You know, I understand that there's the American dream and all that, and that there's this people come here for wealth and all that, but at some point these problems need to be addressed. That's kind of my freestyling on that, if that all makes sense to you.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I was gonna say that even though these people come from there, you don't think there's a unifying because of like that they speak Spanish, that even though they might have differences like that, they still come under the banner of Spanish speaking. And I say that because and I speak about now about Texas, you know, that I don't know if you knew this. I found this out looking up stuff recently.
Mm.
Sometimes when I get into my own stuff, that Texas was one of the first ones that was like where it like integrated like the Spanish legal system. It kept a lot of the Spanish legal system that had a lot of they call it like a unitary system, and then and
Yeah.
also like the Anglo-Saxon like common law,
Hmm.
and like where it's still where they still have both systems. They integrated both of them because they understood that, I don't know if they understood it, but it was like, hey, they're just traditional to, Spanish was here first maybe, but then like real quick the English. So you don't think that some of the that even though you're calling out that they're further south or they're from there, that
Hmm.
they don't fall under the banner of like Spanish speaking people?
Well, even the Spaniards governed them differently. Even the Spaniards had different systems of law. So you have to keep in
Okay.
mind before Latin American independence was the case, for about 200, 300 years, pretty much all of what we now call Latin America was ruled under a series of viceroyalties or colonial governments. The viceroyalty of Nueva España is what Mexico used to be, and a lot of Central America. The the kingdom of Nueva Granada is what most of northern South America used to be. That's Colombia, Venezuela, you know, Peru, all these other places were these large vice royalties, and they all had different systems of law because they had different kinds of people living there. They did have generally Spanish law, but they adapted differently. And so the example you bring up, yeah, I wasn't familiar with that specifically, but it doesn't at all surprise me because something similar happened in Louisiana, where Louisiana kept French law alongside Anglo-Saxon law. So this is something that exists in other states too, not outside of Texas. Not to say Texas isn't unique in this case, but the difference is that the Tejanos living in Texas that were then annexed by the United States in 1848, or well before that, the admission of Texas was a couple of years before the Mexican War, but the Tejanos that lived there were in a large part the same Tejanos that had settled there all the way back into the 1500s, the 1600s. Like so even though they spoke Spanish, they had been on the Rio Grande River, they had been on the Bravo River, or the Rio Bravo. They had been in all of these places, and they had stayed there, and they had set up their own communities and their own systems of law, without really moving anywhere because that was their home. And that's an entirely different group of people. That's why I emphasize Tejanos versus Norteños versus Istmos, and all that other stuff, because they're, you know a lot of times they get put under this banner of just generally mestizo, when in reality there's a bunch of different people. So the problem is, it would be the exact same, maybe not the exact same, even though they speak Spanish, they don't think the way Norteños do. They don't think the way even Centros in Guadalajara and Mexico City do, or Colombians do, or Argentinians do. They think differently because they are from that different place. And even though they speak Spanish, their dialect is different. They use words that a lot of other people don't. There's even some Mayan words that they use that they throw around every now and again. There's slang, um, and even in terms of religion, you hear stuff. A lot of people are talking about Santa Muerte and stuff like that, and in a lot of places, these people worship stuff like that. And so that's the point I want to make. It's like I'm not decrying them, and I'm not saying they're all like this, but these are generally the kinds of people that are coming to the United States. But it's not just them. It's not just them. It's people from all over the world. If they can't get into the United States, they just go to Mexico and land a ship in, let's say I can't think of a city on the Pacific coast of Mexico, but they land on the Pacific coast of Mexico and just walk all the way up across the United States border. And these could be people from Somalia, from Arabia, from India. They just land in Mexico because it's easier to get into the United States from that route than anywhere else. And one way or another, even if we do want to keep immigration, this system is broken, man. You've got all sorts of people just flowing across the border in these massive droves, not just Eastmos, not just all these other, but like international terrorists in a lot of circumstances. And I know we don't like the US government, but a lot of these people are violent people. And basically there just needs to be an enforcement of the border existing. There needs to be a system in place where we vet people, because otherwise, otherwise we can't keep it the way it is, man, because you're gonna have a lot of issues from that.
Yeah. So then that kind of leads into my next line of questioning a little bit was I've heard you say, and I want you to kind of explain it because I heard you explain it, but it was interesting. But it was we're currently still in the Trump zeitgeist,
Yeah.
and Trump played into or leaned into the immigration issue for sure. Definitely leaned into the Obama not being a Kenyan, I guess, or something like that. He leaned into that in the beginning. He leaned into a lot of stuff that played with people, I guess, that I don't know, man. I don't even know what, people that just like that kind of stuff, man. I don't know. I mean, whatever, and it's probably it could be all true. I don't know, but it didn't matter to me. I guess that kind of goes into the part of like, if you get into like the party politics or whether he's Kenyan or not and all that, like, doesn't matter. I mean, if he's the president, he's the president. If people respect him as that's the, but, he leaned into a lot of this stuff, but you've also kind of, so what is the Trump zeitgeist and explain it, and then why it's important for the current our current I guess culture battle that we're having, where the United States is going to play the biggest role in the world for where all of this we tying it back in because I heard you where all this culture bearing stratum's gonna is where they're all kind of coming together.
Yeah. This is a topic when we start talking about the future of America. I mean, Donald Trump, the reason that we're still living in the Trump zeitgeist is because Trump was in many ways supposed to be president in 2020. We all know that that election was rigged. We all know that Trump won. There's certain I've heard arguments made that he didn't, but I don't necessarily believe those.
I like Curtis Yarvin's take that the Democrats stole that election fair and square.
They stole it fair and square.
So that
Yeah,
puts
that's
it that puts everything in place to me. Like, okay, well then that's right. Then the other side could steal it fair and square. When it just goes back and forward. So
yeah. You've stolen what I've rightfully taken already. Um, but no, yeah. I mean, the thing is that Biden's presidency is really just an unpresidency. Biden isn't really president, and everyone knows that. He's just the kind of dude in the office. And the reason we're still living in the Trump zeitgeist is because there's a Trump-sized hole in American politics that only one individual can fill. You know, Trump has kind of been sitting back. He's been taking a couple of years to recoup. He's been doing some stuff on the side. But I heard recently his Twitter account might be reinstated. He's got Truth Social going on. He's trying to break back into this, I think, in 2024. And I don't like Trump totally for a lot of reasons, but regardless, it doesn't take a genius to tell you that starting from 2014, 2015, Trump is the most important person in America, at least individually, just in terms of the weight that he pulls, in terms of the cultural force he has.
That's
Like
for sure. That's for sure.
you
Yeah.
can go to anywhere in the United States. You ever heard of Donald Trump? And they'll start talking. Like a kind of guy who does that is really the center of the zeitgeist. And I think the zeitgeist will go on until about 2028 because I think he will get back in 24 through one way or another, whether it be by fairly winning or rightfully stealing. Um, I do think that we haven't seen the last of Donald Trump. And that's what I mean by the Trump zeitgeist. After Trump, that's when it starts getting a bit murkier. A lot of people talk about how great DeSantis is. I'm not convinced, but there's a possibility there. But I don't think he could ever be a national figure. I think he's really hit his limit with being great in Florida, and I don't think he can do much more beyond that. But after Trump, Lord knows, man, it's going to be the Wild West again because everyone in the Democrat Party is like 80 years old. They have no young guys to replace them. That's one of the reasons why they're clinging onto power so much is they have no young people to succeed them. They have no replacements. The Republicans are ass backwards. They don't know what the heck they're doing half the time. And I don't think they're going to survive either. So who
Yeah.
knows, man?
Yeah, you also had some articles several months ago about the upcoming Civil War, and man, and we talked a little football, and you know what? Uh, I tend to think that football probably plays a bigger role in the pace of things than it's given credit. And of course, I'm saying that because that's my shit, and I'm hyping it up, of course. But like, I remember like back in my Alex Jones days, back in like early 2000, mid 2000s. Oh, the North American Union, and that died out. But it's coming in 2026 in the form of the World Cup. Mexico, United States, and Canada is hosting it.
Mhm.
And is the 2026 World Cup going to happen, or are we going to be in civil war, man? I need to know because I'm saving money for these tickets, Vato.
So, even if you take my super near term prediction of that civil war seriously, and I want to ensure you that like I don't think a civil war is 100% guaranteed to happen. I wrote that article because I wanted to do a thought experiment of what it would look like if it were to happen. I hope to God it does not happen. But in order to save your World Cup prospects, I'll tell you this: I don't think that the Civil War will happen until 2028 at the absolute freaking earliest.
Okay, then we're good
Like
then.
I would be surprised. I will tell you though, like I don't know why the heck that one of the reasons I hate FIFA so much is that they let some backwater ass country like Qatar host the World Cup in freaking December, man. In December. That's just that's obscene to me. The
I
World Cup is a summer thing. You're supposed to be getting drunk with your boys,
Well,
while
actually, man,
watching it.
I've been fixing up my house here
Mm.
so I can get drunk with the fire by the fireplace, man. Like it's gonna be interesting. I'm always like on the like I don't take things too negative, man. I'm always like, yeah, it would be right now. We'd probably be all watching it, but well, fuck it. It's gonna be in the wintertime, so we'll have a fireplace and we just drink some whiskey and watch some games, man. Just chill, So I don't take it like that. I also do say like when the United States starts caring more about the FIFA president than our own president, I feel that there'll be a lot more world peace. I think, but yeah, man. I want to say and be respectful of your time. I have more stuff to talk about. Maybe I can have you back on. I'd like to
Sure.
say that I enjoyed the conversation,
I did as well.
and I think these type of conversations need to be had because there's a lot of information and that can be transmitted between people that are willing to take in new information or get clarifications, which I did. So yeah, man, thank you for coming on. Please feel free to plug in where people can reach you at and any type of speeches or things you might have coming on. I know you posted that you're gonna maybe take a little break on some fronts. Go
Yeah.
ahead and freestyle and so people can know where to reach you and all that.
Yes, sir. You can find me on Twitter at Cav King Paul. That's CavKingPaul. You can find me on Telegram. My Telegram channel is Hotel Fahrenheit, spelled the same way as my fake last name, FAHRENHEIDT. And you can find me on Substack, where I post most of my thoughts and articles. Paul Fahrenheit, spelled the same way. .substack.com. So that's all my stuff.
Perfect, man. I hope things don't have to be or continue to be in a way where you can't show your face. And hopefully, maybe next time that you come on, things are better and it'll be during the World Cup. And maybe I can have you on during then and we can have a little chat about some football and,
Yes,
and
sir.
bring that back into it, man. Thanks for coming on, man. Peace.
Yes, sir. Peace.